Well, good morning, everybody. As Laura mentioned, I'm Margaret Lee, and I am a senior engineer here with EnSave. I specialize in the Rural Development REAP grant program that we have. And if you're not familiar with EnSave already, EnSave is one of the nation's largest USDA certified technical service providers. We provide a variety of different kinds of engineering services and reporting for farms and rural small businesses in all 50 states, as well as 2 US protectorates. Next slide. So the North Jersey Renewable Energy Development Assistance Program, NJREDA, is a program being administered by North Jersey RC&D in partnership with EnSave. And this is a federal grant to provide engineering and consulting services to farms and rural businesses so that they can learn more about ways that they can implement renewable energy systems on their farm. We do some design work. So as part of the NJREDA, we will actually design a renewable energy system for you, evaluate your renewable energy resource availability, and so forth, provide estimates for you on what a renewable energy system would cost you, what kind of energy savings you can expect to receive. And we also evaluate proposals by renewable energy system vendors. And because of this grant and partnership through NJREDA, all of these engineering services are provided at no cost to farms or rural small businesses. Next slide. All right. So the primary focus of this webinar today is going to be updates to the Rural Energy for America program as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed the past summer. But several of you may or may not have some familiarity with the REAP program already. And so if you are new to the REAP program and what's involved there, we're going to kind of be covering both bases. I'm going to walk you through what REAP is about, how it works and what it can do for you. And then I'm going to call out specific changes to REAP program if you're already familiar that came through the IRA. And then the third thing we're going to do is I have a series of photos where we're going to have an opportunity to take a look at a variety of different renewable energy system implementations on farms and small businesses. Next slide. So the biggest change and the big headline for the Inflation Reduction Act was a massive, massive increase to the total amount of funding that's going into the REAP program. And this is funding that is earmarked for grants, which are awarded to farms and rural small businesses to pay for a portion of their renewable energy system project installation, with no requirement to pay that money back, or loan guarantees as well. And here you have, we are currently, although this is calendar year 2023, this is USDA fiscal year 22. And so you can see in the previous 2 years, last year and the year prior, the funding from Congress to REAP was typically in the $50 to $60 million range. FY21 program was $47 million. FY22 funding this year is $820 million. So that's 1.5 orders of magnitude increase in funding. So this is definitely the year, if you've been thinking about putting in a renewable energy system, this is definitely the year to do it. You'll notice that IRA did increase the funding in follow-on years out into the future, but this is a very heavily front-end loaded program. So the vast majority of the increased funding is going into fiscal year 2022. So this is the year to definitely make an application. I think you skipped a slide. There you go. All right. So another really big change is in the amount of the grant award available to a farm or rural small business. Since the inception of the REAP program with rural development, grant awards were capped at 25% of the total cost of the renewable energy system. So if your solar vendor gave you a proposal and quoted a price of $100,000 for a photovoltaic panel system, your grant award from REAP would be capped at 25% or $25,000, leaving you to find your own financing for the remaining $75,000. This year, fiscal year 22, the grant award has been increased from 25% to 40%. So that's a very, very sizable increase. And the official word from rural development is that after this current grant award round, which has a March 31st, 2023 deadline, after that March 31st deadline, REAP grant awards are going to raise to 50% for the rest of the program. We had an increase in the maximum caps on grant awards, and some people are not aware that REAP will fund two different types of programs and projects. They do an energy efficiency improvement project, which is the replacement of an existing system with a more energy efficient in-kind piece of equipment. And then they have the renewable energy system projects, which are for the installation of new renewable energy systems. So on the EEI project side, we had an increase in the 40% increase in the cap, and the combination of the 40% increase in the grant award rate and the increase in the cap on the amount of the grant serves to significantly increase the total project size that you can have. So for example, for renewable energy system projects, up to and including last year, the largest renewable energy system project that you were eligible for a GREEP grant for was a $2 million project. Now, not only does the size of the cap of the grant increase from $500,000 to $1 million, the increase in the 40% ratio has the net effect of bringing projects up to $2.5 million for total project size. Next slide. Now, looking at smaller projects, an interesting effect has also been that because of the increase from 25% to 40%, even though the minimum grant amount has not changed for either EEI projects or RES projects, the change in the ratio has brought down the minimum project size. So up to last year, if you wanted to do a renewable energy system project, that project had to have a value of $10,000 or more. This year, because of the 40%, you can now get a REAP grant for a project of only $6,250. So that's going to open the window for a lot of producers who, particularly if you're a farmer, particularly in the area of animal producers, where the majority of your loads is lighting and occasional small scale ventilation and heating. This is going to make a lot of projects who vendors or rural development may have told you in the past your project was too small. This is going to open the window for you to be able to participate in the REAP program. Next slide. USDA has also announced to state energy officers that there will be an additional round of funding. I am showing the title of this slide as a possible additional round of funding because the formal announcement has not been made by rural development yet, but they did do a staff update at the staff update, they were all told there would be a second round and it will be a spring round They've not been given an exact date for the application deadline for that round yet. There is also a possibility that the second spring round may be the point where the 50% grant share amount kicks in. Most of the energy officers I've spoken with have said they feel like the spring round application deadline is likely to be end of June, because that will give them an opportunity to have sent out award notices from the March 31st round, which typically go out in the end of May or early June. And a June 30th second round of applications would give them a little bit of breathing room before they needed to score projects. There is also in fiscal year 23, there's a round of funding that's often overlooked because it's capped at project sizes under $20,000. But again, if you're a producer who's looking at a relatively small project, this is an ideal opportunity for you because you are competing against only other small projects, and you're competing for specially earmarked funds to go to small projects. So generally from year to year, your chances of getting a REAP grant award in the October, what they call small project round, are generally much better than they are if you are at the same project size and you attempt to compete in the spring March 31st round. So there are several areas of the REAP program which have not changed. And the first area is who is eligible to participate. There's been no change there. And this is often a source of confusion for a lot of farms. You can participate in a variety of USDA programs as a farm, such as NRCS EQIP, NRCS, excuse me, easement programs, crop insurance programs, and so forth, and be classified as a farm. But rural development uses a different classification for being a farm than the other U.S. Department of Agriculture agencies use. To be a farm, you need to, either the person or entity who owns the property needs to earn 51% or more of gross receipts from the sale of agricultural production. We like to use the test phrase, products that were grown or raised. So if you grow corn that was grown and you're a farm, if you grow, if you have a dairy and you milk goats or cows, and you put fluid milk into a large storage tank for cooling, and a tanker truck comes up and takes away unprocessed milk, you're a farm. If you raise grapes and you're a vineyard and you turn those grapes into wine, and what you actually sell are bottles of wine, you're not a farm, you're a rural small business. If you pasteurize and bottle your milk, you're not a farm, you're a rural small business. Now, there's an advantage to being a rural small business, actually, and there are additional bonus points on the application scoring system available to rural small businesses who have been in business for a year or more. So it's actually to your advantage to be a rural small business in terms of your ability to compete against other applicants who have made an application in your particular funding pool. You'll get more points for being a rural small business. Now, with regard to being rural, if you are a small business, there's folklore wisdom out there that says if you're in a community whose population is less than 50,000, you're rural, and that's actually incorrect. There are some communities whose population is less than 50,000, and they are not considered to be rural areas. There are other areas who the incorporated township may be in excess of $50,000, but those are considered to be rural areas. There is actually on the U.S. Department of Agriculture website a lookup map function where you can enter an address and you can get a determination whether your actual property location address is rural or not. And at the end of this slide deck, we have a set of resources, and one of the links on those resources is that property lookup. The other thing you need to do in order to participate in REAP is to be a small business, where small is defined as based on the Small Business Administration size standards. And SBA standards are based on your NAICS code, or your North American Industrial Classification System code. And again, there's a link on resources to how a little lookup function on a website that you can find out what your NAICS code is. For the majority of NAICS codes, your gross receipts need to be under $750,000, and your employees need to be under 30. So that's a pretty high bar. The vast majority of small businesses definitely fall within the rural small business definition of small. You can be a nonprofit farm and participate in REAP as long as 51% or more of gross receipts for the nonprofit come from sale of products. They can't come from donations. You cannot be a nonprofit and be a rural small business. Next slide. There's been no change to the eligible project types. So again, there's the two types of projects. There's an energy efficiency improvement project. And as I mentioned before, you're going to replace inefficient equipment with new, more efficient equipment upgrades. And again, if you are a livestock farmer, or you're an equine operation, you're a dairy operation, the equipment in this particular photo is radiant tube heaters. Excuse me. And this is a great option if you're interested in providing wintertime heating, whether that's occasional heating or steady heating, because it's substantially more energy efficient than forced hot air. So if you've tried to run propane forced hot air heaters in your winter conditioned spaces, and you just can't afford to run the heat because it's so expensive, you can typically see, depending on what equipment you're currently running now, anywhere from 30 to as much as 70% reduction in your propane cost by going with a radiant tube heater. So this is a great energy efficiency improvement project to consider. And farms and rural businesses are allowed to apply for one rural renewable energy system project and one energy efficiency improvement project in the same year. So you could do an EEI project to upgrade your heat, as well as do an RES project to bring in some renewable energy. Next slide. So renewable energy system projects, the intention behind these grants are to install new renewable energy systems or to expand the size of existing renewable energy systems. You can have a wide variety of different kinds of renewable energy technologies. The vast majority of projects that are submitted to REAP are photovoltaic projects. So that's what most people commonly refer to as, solar panels or solar cells. But if you're using a lot of wash-up water, solar thermal hot water systems are really excellent projects that can have enormous savings in propane costs. So if you are a dairy and you're using propane to heat your hot water in traditional hot water tanks, solar thermal hot water could be a very good option for you. The maximum availability for hot water out of your solar thermal system aligns very nicely with your afternoon parlor cleanup. So that's a great project. It's a low cost project. And I think it's a very underrated project that a lot of people ought to be considering. If you're an egg producer, solar thermal for your egg cleaning system is another great project. Wind is another good project too. In New Jersey, you'll hear a lot of people tell you that wind is not viable because the average annual wind speeds, both in summer and in winter, are relatively low. But what a lot of people don't realize is they are talking about community or utility scale wind farms, which have a very, very high threshold of average wind speeds in order to make those very large turbines go. But again, particularly if you're looking for lighting loads or you're looking for ventilation loads, wind or a solar wind combo can be a very, very good system for you to install. We've also got air source heat pumps. So again, if you're using some kind of traditional furnace to heat workshop spaces, or you're using space heaters, or those kinds of technologies, an air source heat pump can be a very nice upgrade for you. In this particular case, you are changing out existing equipment for new, more efficient equipment. But in New Jersey, they do consider an air source heat pump upgrade to be a renewable energy system upgrade. So that's another, I think, very underutilized project option out there for you. Next slide. So there's no changes in the types of energy consumption relative to prior years. Projects must have, and the catchphrase is no residential benefit. So in theory, the renewable energy system project that you install is intended to offset your utility purchases or other energy provider purchases of farm or small business use, electricity, propane, fuel oil, and so forth. With regard to what constitutes a residence for rural development, I think everybody usually understands and gets it that if you've got a house and it's on the property and you live in it, that's residential use. A lot of people have the impression that a rental house that's on the property that is rented out as a business, although IRS will consider that to be business income and you need to file a Schedule C and so forth as a business, rural development will not allow those types of projects to be included in the project scope. And this one always catches everybody. If you've got farm worker housing on your site and farm workers are living there, that is still considered a residential unit. So its use has to be excluded. Now, there are some interesting things that you can do to endeavor to offset some of your residential use, insofar as you are not restricted by a rural development REAP grant to offset exactly 100% of your farm or business use. So let's say your farm use is 20,000 kilowatt hours a year. Typical residence, single family, 3-2 detached home there in New Jersey uses about 14,000 kilowatt hours of electricity in a year. So you can install a renewable energy system, REAP funded, for up to 150% of your documented farm or business use. So you've got that 20,000 kilowatt hours of documented use. You can install a system to cover that will generate 30,000 kilowatts, which covers the 20,000 from your farm and 10 of that 14,000 for your residence. It's technically not being generated for residential use, and you will have a separate meter, but there's kind of an interesting sort of little catch or loophole in how utility companies net meter. Utility companies do the netting process for giving you credits for renewable energy generated by site, not by account type. So you'll have a commercial meter for your farm and you're getting the renewable energy credits coming into that. You'll have a separate meter for the residents. So that meets the no residential benefit requirement for rural development. But you can generate enough that when your utility company nets you out over the entire site, your generation offsets both that residential and that farmer business use on the property. Next slide. No changes to the loan guarantees. I think one of the most misunderstood areas of rural development REAP is that REAP does not make loans. REAP loans come from a commercial lender like FSA, Farm Credit, your bank, and so forth. What rural development provides is a loan guarantee to the commercial lender, which says that should you default on the loan, rural development will pay off the balance of the loan. That's what a loan guarantee is. So the benefit for you as a loan participant is that you generally get a pretty significant improvement in your loan terms. So you generally get a lower monthly payment on your loans. You generally get a lower total interest rate on your loans. And if you're looking for a loan that's a little bit larger, perhaps then.
Margie, we lost your sound. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, so I think the loan guarantees are also very underutilized. There's a real tendency in renewable energy systems. You're going to get offered by the majority of vendors that you get a quote or proposal on installing the system. You're going to get an offer for lending for the balance of the cost of your system from them. And I wish a lot more farms and businesses would go ahead and take a look at the loan guarantees that are coming from rural development as well. I think with that guarantee, as I said, both your interest rate and your payment structure are generally more favorable than what you're going to get just out on the commercial lending market. One thing about grant and loan guarantees as a combination, rural development, as with the majority of U.S. Department of Agriculture programs, caps you out at 75% on total assistance. So the intention there is that the farmer small business has some skin in the game to the tune of 25% of their own contribution to the project. Next slide. So that's me and my contact info. That's my direct dial phone number and my direct email. So you're more than welcome if you have any questions or would like to talk about your particular situation. Definitely feel free to give me a call or send me an email. And if you have particular questions that are best directed to rural development, Helen Wurst is the New Jersey Rural Development Energy Officer. She's the person who actually collects the applications. She does the application scoring, answers questions about the program and so forth. So that is her direct contact information as well. And at this point, we'll open it up to questions. Okay, can future needs be estimated in energy calculations? And the answer to that question is a little bit complicated one, but in New Jersey, the answer to that question is yes, they can. And so one of the advantages you have being in New Jersey, not all states have RES development assistance. Northern Jersey is very fortunate that Laura and her crew there at the RC&D went ahead and applied for and received this funding. One of the things that you get as a participant in the RETA program is, as part of our technical service provider engineering services, we will do that estimation of future energy requirements and size your system accordingly. And we provide a document to you, which is called a Renewable Energy System Technical Report, which becomes a formal part of your REAP application package. And that the methodology behind the estimation, the estimated future baseline and so forth is all included in that document. And so that's that helps considerably in being successful in a REAP grant where you want more, you're asking for more energy than you're currently using today. Any other questions?
I have a question about the nonprofit. I have a nonprofit farm, and so were you saying that the donations that we receive must be under 50% of our total farm income?
51%, yes, that's correct.
And are you basing that then, would that be based on 2022 alone or over multiple years?
That's an interesting question. The documentation you'll be required to provide in conjunction with your REAP grant application would include 3 previous years of income tax returns and a current year income statement and balance sheet. And each energy officer from state to state has some latitude in making determinations for several things. One of which is, are you truly a farm or not? Are you truly a nonprofit or not? Are you a small business or not? So that's probably a question better directed to Helen Wurst, and Laura just posted Helen's contact info in the chat. My sense from having worked with Helen in the past is that if you hit the 51% threshold in your last tax year, but not the prior 2, you're probably okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Is a solar farm installation considered in the program? And I'm going to have to guess here what you mean by a solar farm installation. I think you're probably referring to a solar PV array in a typical community or utility type of configuration where I have ground mounted panels. The bottom edge of the panels are somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 feet off the ground. They're spaced continuously in long strips of racking. Is that kind of what you're thinking about when you say, okay, yeah. Sure, yeah. Rural development, REAP, does not have any selection criteria or any application point scoring with regard to how your photovoltaic array is laid out, whether it's roof mounted versus ground mounted versus pole mounted and so forth. There are some bonus points available to you if you have what's referred to as an agrivoltaics implementation. And this is where the installation of the photovoltaic panels do not interfere with, and in fact can often have a very positive synergistic effect on whatever farming activity you're doing underneath that. So the difference between agrivoltaics versus a traditional solar farm style installation is that in agrivoltaics, the panels are not spaced in a long continuous strip. I typically have spacing somewhere between 50 and 100% of the panel length in between each panel. And they're up on poles anywhere from 8 to 15 feet above the ground. And so that can look like photovoltaic or PV over pasture land. And so you can have cattle or horses grazing underneath the panels. That can look like PV over conservation easement. So if you have for example, you have a wildlife conservation easement or are interested in being able to set aside a portion of your farm, if you're going to do a traditional solar farm installation, you're already saying, I'm going to set aside a portion of my farm that I'm not going to actively have in agricultural production anymore. You can raise those panels instead of the bottom edge being 2.5 to 3.5 feet off the ground. You can raise those panels to where that bottom edge is about 4.5 to 6 feet off the ground, and you can plant conservation easement planting either for pollinator forage or for wildlife forage underneath that, and then have that land set aside, qualify for both a USDA NRCS conservation easement. So you're going to get paid for not farming that land now. And in many states, they have a conservation practice where they will, through an EQIP grant, also pay you a portion of the cost to plant that particular forage or other habitat planting. So if you're thinking about a solar farm style installation, yes, you can do that if that's what you want to do. There's other ways you can do that where you can make a little bit more money off of taking that land out of production, feel a little bit better about what you're doing for the environment, not have to go through and mow and spray herbicide like you do on those solar farm installations. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what your options there are, definitely, give me a call or shoot me an email and we can talk about that. I can show you some photos of what that looks like.
Margie, I have a question. If I was to receive a grant make an application in March and receive the grant, what's the timeline or the amount of time I have to complete the project?
So you have 12 months or 1 year from the date of your grant award letter to complete the project. Grant award letters typically go out somewhere around the end of May to mid-June. So you're going to receive a letter from Rural Development on June 10th that says, congratulations, you've been awarded a REAP grant in the amount of blah, blah, and all your details. You have until June 9th of 2024 to complete the project. Now, you can, if you aren't able to complete the project, you can request another 1 year extension. Which are pretty much always granted, which effectively gives you 2 years from the date of your award letter to finish the project. Other questions? All right, well, I want to thank everybody for attending. Laura, you want to say some parting words?
Yeah, thank you all for attending. The next, what Lunch and Learns will be some following Fridays from now. On the 24th, there's one about solar energy for your preserve farm. And we'll have SADC on there as well to give a portion of the presentation. March 3rd, potential for agrivoltaics. So seeing different examples of agrivoltaics. And then March 17th, more understanding REAP and other financing. So please feel free to join in the future webinars, and just thank you for attending today and your interest. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.